before this weekend, but I heard a tape of and had a lot of good things that I've been able to use in my recovery since then. Uh, with that, will everybody please help me welcome Motorcycle Ed from Smyrna, Georgia.
One thing that my sponsor told me about 20 minutes ago was, let's go do it. And that's what. When Paul called me and asked me to talk, it was like I was already in bed, you know, and I have this routine that I like to follow when I'm at home. And that's go to bed at a reasonable hour and get up early in the morning. And I done went to bed and you know, he called and it was just like, I had trouble going back to sleep. Okay, this is a dream come true for me. I don't know when in my recovery my dream got established, but I do know that when I first shared it, the guy told me, he said, well, you just keep coming, and if it's a real dream, it will happen. And a lot of the ideas that I had about dreams hadn't happened, but some that I didn't have, you know, very much happened. I'll give you a little background of where I'm coming from is, you know, a little county down in Georgia. It's not so little populated anymore. When I was growing up, it was a rural county, and I lived on a 120-acre farm where we were tenants. You know, we didn't own it. You know, I helped as soon as I got big enough. My twin brother and I helped with the chores, and chores on that farm was slopping the hogs and feeding the chickens and mending the fences and running the cattle. And that was my play toys. Whenever I wanted to play, I'd just go play with the cows, you know, or the chickens or whatever, because I can tell you I came from a broken home, which by some people's standards is very true, because Daddy left when I was 4, and that's the only memory I have. You know, she came back to see us one time. But in truth, as I understand it today, it was a real good home. You know, Mama done her very best to raise me in the best way that she knew how. You know, like go to church and go to school, and every time when I got up into 14, 15, 16 years old, you know, that thing about quitting school and all this, and the only thing Mama would ever say about that is, as long as you're under my roof, you will go to school. And the only alternative to that was to move out, and I didn't want to move out. So it was either, you know, go to school and do what I could, but through the skin on my teeth, I finally made it through high school. You know, got that little piece of paper that some employers look at, especially when you start in your career field. In my teen years was something in could be called normal, couldn't be called normal. I thought it was pretty normal. You know, you get 14, 15, you start looking at women and chasing women and going out drinking, raising hell, getting sick. You know, football was real interesting. They wanted me to play, and since Mama couldn't afford to pay the insurance that was required, I didn't get to play. The reason the coaches wanted my brother and I to play was because we was big and brawny, and we got scratched during PE or, you know, busted a knuckle or something like that. We didn't go running and crying and all that. You know, you just scrape it, wipe it off, and go on, because you know, on the farm doing chores, you learn about good hard work. At least I did. And So I got into the band and got my first girlfriend in the band, and my twin brother and I used to sit on the back seat of the bus. We claimed it. I mean, you know, if you wanted to sit on the back seat, then you had to fight two instead of one. And so we always got the back seats of the bus, you know, and that's where I learned the neck. You know, like petting to a limit and then stopping, you know, with no relief. And that was real frustrating, you know, but the sex education I was getting at the time was off the bathroom walls, and I had a lot of weird ideas, what I consider weird today, you know, about what you're supposed to do and the way you're supposed to do it. Right after high school, you know, marriage came along as a result of a pregnancy, and that lasted a year and a half. Because I didn't want it. I wasn't willing to put forth the effort on my part. I blamed it on her dirty dishes. So after that, I went into the Army, and up until this time, the only drug that I took was alcohol. And, you know, I was a typical good redneck country and western guy, you know, fulfilling the image of the people that I was hanging around with at the time. And basic was real good. I came out of basic in the best physical shape that I've ever been in my whole life. I also came out with a sore jaw that this little bitty Puerto Rican guy gave me, because after, you know, X number of weeks, we was allowed post privileges, and I hit the bus with an AWOL bag and went off base and got 4 pints and come back on base. And after that long a period of time without anything, a pint done me quite well. And I had the habit, or I had started developing a habit of loud mouth and letting my mouth overload my ass. And he taught me that I had done exactly that. But the rest of the basic and AIT was, you know, per se. I done okay in the AIT school, you know, come out fourth in my class. And the instructors, you know, all liked to have me around because at that time I was still able to have something called common sense. It later in life left me, but you know, and I made the bar scenes and all that stuff, but when I got to AIT, or got to my permanent duty station, which wasn't where I'd been told it was going to be, I took 6 months of Vietnam training and wound up with orders for Fairbanks, Alaska. And I copped a real big resentment. At that time, all I knew to call it was MAD. I didn't know that it had another big, long word. One of them college words, you know. And I found out about other drugs in Alaska. You know, my first experience with marijuana was, you know, with a bottle of liquor and a bottle of wine and a guitar and a little joint in one of the little rooms there, and we was off in Never Never Land. And the year I was spending in Alaska was spent in that manner. You know, I didn't do anything without any kind of dope. If there's any kind of line to cross, I crossed it in Alaska. You know, I don't know if I was born an addict or whatnot. I know that in the inventories that I've done over the years, I can see where my selfishness and jealousy were in my teen years, you know, concerning my twin brother. You know, Mom never would buy either one of us anything unless she could afford to buy two. You know, and I got mad at him in my teen years and pre-teens about, you know, I'd want a little red wagon for Christmas, and Mama couldn't buy two, so I didn't get one. And some Christmases she'd buy one, and I'd have to share it. You know, and that didn't settle right with Ed. But I got out of service, you know, in a good dope fiend fashion way. I found out that the service had a program called an early out program, and if you could get a job on civilian life, and if it fell within certain categories, then you could get letters and be out 6 months early. So I took it to go do roofing, which was classified as seasonal employment, which it never was. We roofed all year. But my attitude when I got out was to party, you know, grow my hair long. That happened in the last of 71. In 73 I grew my beard, and I shaved it off one time, and I grew it in September of 73, and I shaved it off in December. This little honey that I was dating wanted to see me without one. So I shaved it off and went to see her, and she said, grow it back. So that's what I did, and haven't became willing to grow it or shave it off since. And it was growed for several different reasons. To help me fit in with the drug movement or cultural or whatever you want to call that was happening back then, and you know, to be able to walk down the streets and have people identify me as a user, and you know, somebody that may be toting something, and we could get together and share, you know, or I could sell, and my greatest dope deal going down was 4 bags of reefer at one time. You know, and that got me so paranoid, driving around Cobb County with 4 bags. You know, 1 bag was fine. You know, 1 bag of dope and a case of Black Jack in the, you know, car was nothing. But 2 bags was, you know, real shaky, and so I wasn't ever a dope dealer. I just used a whole bunch. My using, you know, finally led me through a lot of the per se things that we go through. 1 DUI. The little school that they sent me to in Cobb County was real good. The instructor, I don't know if his program or not, but he took a special interest to me and tried to get me to stay afterwards, you know, to talk and all that. Like he'd, you know, we'd kind of walk sideways to the door. You know, because I'd be in a hurry to get to the car to make some drink. Because you couldn't drink anything before you went to that school, and it was real difficult for me to get off of work and not mix a drink. Because I developed that pattern, and it had been a pattern for years. And to have to wait till 8:30 when the class was over with, like get off at 4 and have to wait till 8:30 before I could mix me a drink was what? But I only had to do that 1 night a week for 4 weeks, and so it was tolerable. And I did slow down a little bit. I bought a motorcycle to help me, you know, with I forget what I classified it. I hadn't accepted a lot of things at that point that I feel I have today, but you know, the solemn vows that we take, you know, like I'm not going to get on this thing when I'm drinking or smoking. And Mama, I was still living at home at the time, and Mama was all paranoid about me getting it because of what she said happened to Daddy one time on one. And you know, Mama, be cool, don't worry. You know, I'm, you know, not going to get all messed up and get on this thing. And at this point, even with all the things that had happened, you know, she really was buying the deal that all I was doing was alcohol. She hadn't found out about the other things, you know. She had found a couple of baggies in my room, you know, and I'd, you know, oh, that's a friend's, and I'm just keeping it. And the day that I came in and she had flushed what she had found. My emotions were not real good. I got all hysterical and said things that I later had to make amends for. But those vows and all this, it just went by the wayside. The promises to the ladies that I was dating and da-da-da, and that's something that is a part of the chain of events that led to my finally seeking some help of some kind. All the ladies that I was dating, bit by bit, stopped dating me, and bit by bit, guess what took their place? And of course, I'd got on the motorcycle and done a few things with it that are not real sane. Stand up on the foot pegs, let go of the handlebars, and turn around to the little honey that's on the back and say, "Hi, how are you doing?" And today I can't even let go of the handlebars altogether without getting, hey, because the way it's built, it leans to the left. Because it's not like a Harley. It's not perfectly balanced and will ride by itself. And a Harley will do that if it's tuned right. But the Christmas of '76 was one that I remembered very vividly, because that's when the suicidal attempts started happening. I'd been thinking about them for a long, long time. The one lady that I'd been dating for 8 years finally said, "I've had enough. I'm leaving. Don't ever call me anymore." And she came by to give me my last Christmas present that Christmas Day, and that week after, between Christmas Day and New Year's Day of '76, I tried every day to go out on the bike, and there's an intersection on Interstate 75 and 85 that come together downtown Atlanta. It's called Brookwood Interchange, and I'd head there every day, loaded and all this, and think about, well, it'll be on the front page of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Motorcyclist kills himself. And got down there to that curve and just could never do it. Didn't have the guts. So I decided New Year's was just a real bummer. It was a little bit of a highlight, but all in all, it was a bummer. And for the way my life was going, I couldn't see starting into 1976 or 77 like 76 had been. There just wasn't that hope. There just wasn't that willingness. So the next weekend I went to the liquor store, bought 2.5 gallons of blackjack, which was a normal routine. The Thursday night before, I'd been to the dope house and got a good bag, and came in that Friday and made another one of them solid vows that I wasn't coming out of my room alive. I was going to do it like some of the rock stars and pass out on my back so that when I threw up, it would go in my lungs and I would die, and that would be the graceful way of going out. Poor Ed. And they'd cry at my funeral and da-da-da-da. But what happened that Sunday morning, about 3 o'clock in the morning, I came to at the commode. And that was not an unfamiliar experience for me. I'd been there quite a few times, but what was in and around the commode that's what got my attention. Because with all the blood and some of that good green stuff that comes out, there was a lot of little fibers floating. And I had enough sense to know that that was not anything that had been put there beforehand as a prop to get me to take a look at my drinking. So I prayed out to the God that I ferociously hated with a purple passion and all the anger that I could muster. Because I'd went to 14 years of Southern Baptist Church, and I'd heard about all the things that particular religion teaches. And at the end of that 14 years, walked out of the church, shot the bird, and left, and swore I'd never go back. But the pain inside the head was great enough that I asked that power to help me find some help. And I've been calling the Cobb Douglas mental health place, along the way, sparsely, always after 5 o'clock when you get the little recording. But one of the things that the DUI school had taught me or it exposed me to in '74 was that AA was out there, and it was something. So that Sunday I looked up Alcoholics Anonymous in the phone book and got their number and called it, and they told me about a meeting and asked me what area of town I lived in, and I told them, oh, it's real close to you, 2 miles away. So I didn't drink anything that day, and around 7:30, 7:15, 7:30, I'd gotten cleaned up, and well, I did drink something that day. I drank 2 drinks. To me at that time, 2 drinks was nothing. It was up over a quart a day. So 2 little old 10-ounce glasses, like farting in a windstorm, And I tried to find that meeting and couldn't ever find it. Found the street, but didn't ever find the house number. And went home discouraged and just went to bed because I was all beat out. And the next afternoon, Monday, I come home from work, and I talked with one of the running buddies, the only running buddy that I still had left. He was at the point that he'd run with me as long as we went off in his vehicle. We couldn't go off on the motorcycles together. He said I rode a little bit too crazy. He wouldn't ride side by side with me anymore. And I talked to him, and he, well, you're just changed brands, Ed. And I'd done that over the years. I don't know how many times, changing brands, changing mixes, eating something, not eating something, all the eating a big chunk of butter, or grease, coat the stomach, it won't, So I got back home and I called AA again, and they told me about the same meeting, and I told the lady, I said, look, I've lived in this county 28 years, and, I'm no dummy, and that place just ain't there. And she said, well, sir, I'm sorry you're having trouble finding it. I know it's there. I've been there. So well, is there anything else? So she gave me a street number, and I knew where it was. It's up in the northern part of Cobb County, and a telephone number. And I went there, and it was a Presbyterian church. And I sat in the parking lot for a long time. I seen a few people go in, and I sat in the parking lot for a long time, because to go in there would be breaking another one of them vows that I'd made at age 17. So I finally went in, the pain of remembering, the day before, and I went in and went in through the fellowship hall in the back of the church, and the guy came, like they was 3 or 4 of them standing up at a table or a coffee pot, back at the other end of the room. And he came toward me, and my thought pattern was, well, I'll get this Jesus freak off my ass and see, where this so-called meeting is supposed to be. And he stuck out his hand and he welcomed me and said, hello, my name's Bob. Can I help you? And for the first time in many years, I'd been welcomed somewhere. And that has made a difference in my recovery. it's just one of them little small things that I still remember. And I sat around, and it was good, and I picked up a white chip and a meeting schedule, and I started going to AA meetings, and street rules that I had learned was, one of them was, ask me no questions, I'll tell you no lies, and they wasn't asking about anything else. So I figured everything else besides alcohol was okay. So I kept doing it. And 2 weeks later, I was drunk again, loaded on alcohol, and I don't believe in slips because I knew good and well what I was doing. You know, I went out of town again to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and when I crossed the Tennessee River on Interstate 75, I knew I was going to drink, no doubt about it. You know, so when somebody says the word slip to me, you know, I laugh. You know, it's just a thing with Ed. You know, I had never had a bottle of liquor or a joint or a chunk of PCP or a chunk of hash just jump up into my hand and say, hey, hello, how are you doing? I've always had to go get it. You know? You know, and if you're sane enough to come to meetings on your own power, you know, I don't believe that, you know, I just didn't know what was happening. The car turned into the driveway and I was standing at the porch with the money in my hand. Sorry, I ain't buying it. You know, go tell it to somebody else. And, you know, I came back from that trip and went back to AA and picked up another white chip and things rocked on, and somewhere during the month of April of 77, I was sitting at a meeting and this guy came in the door about 10 minutes after the meeting started, and since I was in the crowd movements and doing what the crowds do, it's one way you can fit in, I turned around and looked like everybody else looked. And I knew as soon as I looked at him, I don't know even today if he saw me, but I know that when I looked at him, I knew that he knew that I was still smoking dope, and I was going to have to get out of that meeting before he got in, you know, before he got me. So when the meeting closed, and as another thing, I'd had a compulsion to get loaded that day, but I was going to go to a meeting and then go to the liquor store. You know, I was willing to do that much. So when the meeting closed, I headed for the back door. I wasn't sitting too far up toward the front, but just far enough that they had the back door closed and locked before I got there. And I said, well, I'll just scurry out the Al-Anon room. You know, everybody's in the big meeting room, so the Al-Anon room is real good. You don't want nobody to be in there. It wasn't an Al-Anon meeting night. And I got 1 foot away from the door, and this guy nailed me. And stuck out his hand, introduced himself, and 6 hours later he turned loose my hand. And he brought me the message of Narcotics Anonymous. And on up there, straight out there, I went to my first NA meeting to check out the good-looking young women that would be there. No compulsion to get clean whatsoever. And I was, you know, quite impressed with the guy that I met there, you know, the first one that I met when I got there. I was also panic-stricken because they was talking about everything that nobody else was talking about. And they was using that unforbidden word, except in profanity, called God. And I picked up a white chip there. Best that I can figure out today, just as a part of fitting in again. You know, maybe if I pick up a white chip, one of these cute little honeys will want to go home with me. And it was a Friday night, and that's, you know, a living pattern I'd been into for years. Weekend, you get late. And that hadn't been happening too much, so 9 white chips later, I picked up what I believe today to be the last one. it was difficult for me to conceive that marijuana could do to me what alcohol had done, because I was 28, out on my own, got my own apartment, got my own job, got a car, got a motorcycle, da-da-da-da-da, and I can't do what 13-year-old kids can do successfully. And that was a bust for me. But enough of going to the patio, lighting a joint, going to the bathroom, throwing up some more of that good green stuff, washing my mouth out, going back to the patio, relighting the joint, doing the same thing again. And that's where marijuana got me. So I started, on a trip of recovery, and it's not been dull. There's been a lot of challenges for the fellowship around Marietta and Smyrna. Through the grace of a loving spirit, I've been allowed to be a part of a lot of that development. And one thing that has brought is a lot of criticism, and that was real hard to deal with in the sense of, you try to start a new meeting and dead up, man, it won't work. They just ain't enough people in Marietta to support it. And at that time, there were 6 people in Marietta. We could all pile into one car and go to the meeting over on the north side of town. But I had a guy that was my sponsor, and he believed in NA, and I knew that what I'd been doing hadn't been real cool, and hadn't been working too well. And for, not having anything better to do, except go get loaded, I got real involved. At about 1.5 years clean, we started the first clubhouse east of the Rockies. And that was a trip. They also said that wouldn't go. There just wasn't enough support. And, the fellowship of NA in Atlanta, Georgia at that time, wanted a clubhouse, so they drove, from all around metro Atlanta to Marietta to support it. And we started a bunch of meetings. And, it was real weird. A lot of times, my feelings about it would be all really confused. At that time, still went to AA, and I'd be sitting there in an AA meeting, thinking about dope fiends, and feeling guilty because I was there instead of over at the clubhouse doing something that just might help that newcomer stay one more day. And then I'd go to NA and be real ashamed of being in a meeting, and the amount of clean time would be real small. And a lot of times meetings wouldn't start on time, they'd run over, and the topics would be just, well, my dog has got diarrhea, what am I going to do about it? And I'd sometimes leave the meeting feeling worse than I did when I went in. And somewhere along the way, we got 7 meetings a week in Atlanta, Georgia. And with all this confusion and mixed feelings that I had, I talked about it to a lot of people. It just wasn't like to one person, it was with a lot of people. And one of the suggestions I got was, give NA a fair shake, go to 90 NA meetings in 90 days, see what happens. And I done that. And I wasn't loaded. Another suggestion that was gave to me was, was good second step material, Ed. See what God wants you to do. And since I had this thing about that particular word, it was, I ain't asking that for nothing. So they told me that, if the conception that I had wasn't suitable for me and the way that I was thinking at that time, then just get rid of that conception and get me a brand new one. Fired. Far out, I'll do that. So I fired it. And a couple of days later, it came to me that, well, if I fired that, then I best get me something. And a lot of people, was asking me about, have you got a higher power, or, one particular person, was getting more detail than that, in the way of religious, and asking me religious questions, and I wasn't buying that. So one night after a meeting, just on a whim, or just to get the people off my back mainly, of have you got a higher power, I was coming into the apartment complex that I lived in, and there was this huge oak tree that stood out in front of it, and you're it. I got a power greater myself, because it could do something that I couldn't do. And on good days, I'd love that tree. I'd hug it and stroke it, make sure it, none of the bugs was getting on the roots and, around the trunk and all that stuff. And on bad days, I'd kick it and spit on it and piss on it. Every time they asked me about a higher power, yep, got one. Well, is it real teach? Sure is. I ain't touch mine. And that would, like, Ed, you're not detoxed yet. Yeah, so. And that tree did help me. I got all freaked out. I come home from work one day, and the apartment complex had been doing some yard maintenance and everything, and they had cut down my tree. And I drove into the parking lot. Well, my tree, man, my tree's supposed to be right there. And there wasn't nothing but a little bitty, about a 4-inch stub standing there, So I go in and call my sponsor, and, freaked out. And then he said, well, we could just settle down, yeah. He says, go outside and see if you see anything else. I said, well, man, there ain't nothing else out there. I mean, they cut the tree down. He said, just do it. And I went outside, and as I turned a full circle, I counted 7 other little oak trees. And my spirit had multiplied. And I'm not one to rush into a lot of things. I take, that sporadic living is not real cool for me even today. Every once in a while I'll get into it, but I like to be in the way of really checking it out. And they told me I could take as long as I could, or as long as I had to, about with the steps, and so I started, checking a lot of different things out, and I checked 4 other things out. And one was church. I'd had some experience with church, and I tried church clean. It wasn't Southern Baptist. It was another denomination. I was still inside, had too many resentments that I was holding on to go back to Southern Baptist. It wasn't their problem. It was mine, my resentments. I tried agape. I tried AA. And I tried, doing it on my own. And, through a ritual that I had done, after I went to all these things and researched and checked this out and checked that out, which was not an overnight deal. It was close to 2-3 years that I took in doing this. I prayed a prayer that And I staged it, with candles, and I asked the Spirit to reveal to me in a way that I could understand where I was supposed to go, because all this added information, was fine and good, but it hadn't settled the war inside the bed. It hadn't brought, the peace that I felt I was looking for. And for the next 7 days, every time my phone rang, it was the AA answering service asking me if I could call this dope fiend that had called them, or it was somebody from NA that I'd met wanting me to chair a meeting or be discussion leader, or it was somebody else in NA that I'd met and they was having a rough time with staying clean, and he called and asked me for my experience, strength, and hope. And like it just wasn't one phone call a day, folks. It was like I'd come in from work, and unless I took the phone off the hook to get a shower, I wouldn't get a shower. It was just ring, 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 one phone call after another. And at the end of that 7 days, I set up the same ritual and told the Spirit that if the Spirit would give me strength and hope, that I would do my best to surrender to NA and NA only. And that's where I've been for the last 5.5 years. And I haven't regretted a moment of it. And I don't see no needle sticking out of my arm or no joint in my pocket. And I ain't at the liquor store buying dope. So that's what liquor is dope. And I at this moment, I won't get into my strong opinions about that. But there was a lot of work to be done. There was a lot of area service work to be done. There was 22 groups in Atlanta, Georgia by this time, and we was having the area service committee meeting at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night before the regular 8 o'clock scheduled meeting. And we got all them GSRs and everybody else that was interested at the time all in one room and tried to do anything in 1 hour period of time. It just got too insane for a lot of us. So the Marietta people pulled out and started their own ASC. Again, it wasn't going to work. The criticisms came, y'all backstabbing us, and da da da. But one thing that a few of us had seen was new people come to our meetings and suffer and go back out because they couldn't get, some kind of support. And we had this desire to help that newcomer. And we had this desire to better carry the message. And I don't know how many people was coming to meetings, in Marietta by then. It was more than you could fit in a car or a big U-Haul truck, I know that. And I got involved in the World Literature Committee. I went to Lincoln, Nebraska for the second World Literature Conference on a curiosity that I had, that I wanted to see if anybody else in this fellowship was working on our book. I'd been told they were, but I'd been told a lot of things, especially on the street. So curiosity. The next number of miles, I used to remember how many miles it was there and back and how many dollars I spent and all that, and I forgot all that. But I got to sit around the tables with dope fiends from all over, and a sweet memory in my heart is near the close of that conference we came out with, just a little short page, new literature that had been written by dope fiends for dope fiends. And I got off on it, folks. Got a goosebump rush, from the bottom of my toes to the top of my head and out, and one of them little shakies, and I was hooked. And I got further involved, with that so-called movement, a bunch of radicals, that we were called. But none of the criticism really, it hurt some of us, and it hurt me. But down deep, it was that thing again, I wanted a book for dope fiends who hadn't buy dope fiends. And I had even though I didn't know how to express it, I had my life staked on it, even at that time. Because my surrender to Narcotics Anonymous was day by day getting stronger and stronger. It was one of them things that I couldn't see happening, but I got to watch it happening, y'all. Now I got to go to my first World Service Conference. I got elected and got sent out there, and I had all these, ideas presented to me about the way those people were, and da-da-da-da-da, and again, the curiosity was getting to me, and I got to go out there and meet some of them and break bread with them, hug them, talk with them, cry with them, dance and have fun with them. And we had a lit conference out there in Santa Monica, and a lot of them showed up, helped out. At one point we needed $400 to get another mimeograph machine because the one we had just wasn't keeping up. To get another one on Saturday, was another $400. So they started, passing the hat around. It got 3 people down. There's $400 in it. And it wasn't none of the people back here that, it started with the California people. And that changed a lot of the ideas that I'd been presented and, gave me some own experience. And I got some real strong beliefs about that today. And that one thing that reaffirms is one shot and we all shot. Don't give a fuck where you come from. Anybody take dope, we die. And as much as I hate it at times, when I see one do that, it still affects Ed. A little part of me just, oh man, So to deal with those feelings, I surrender more. And I used to be, ashamed when I talk and I'd cry, and not today. Because I've been to enough conventions, and I've heard, a lot of people share on one-on-ones, and, it's not a bad part of Ed's character that has become one that feels for other people. On the street it was. I couldn't feel for other people on the street. I watched what happened to the ones that did that. And I did develop real cold hearts and abuse and use a lot of people. And one of the things that I've been accused of in personal relationships is, where my devotion comes in, it's like some of the women I've dated over the years have, said that ain't no way I can get close to you. And the part of it cries about that. But I've had enough experiences today to know that you know, my higher power has to come first, above all. I've been through the times when I put that in second or third or fourth or even throw it out the window, you know, in my program, and I've got to watch what happens to Ed when Ed does that. And I've got to watch what happens with Ed when Ed keeps that number one. And today I'd rather have it number one. Because me coming from a country, you know, and being barefoot and coveralls and to where I'm at today, I knew I couldn't do it. The best that I could do before I found Joe was lay around and water in my own urine and bowel movements. And today I don't choose that. I'd rather be a part of y'all. You know, and I've had titles and, you know, been on, you know, in the spotlight a lot and da-da-da-da, and, you know, I got an ego. I'm a human being. And it's taught me a lot of lessons, you know. And I've gotten way too cocky and dominated groups. I went to my first home group I went to for 5 years. And first 4 years, you know, it was like I was one of the dominant personalities of that group. And I made mistakes, you know, that bleeding deacon type deal, instead of elder statesman. And it's, you know, it was a learning experience to let go of a group and let it grow on its own. Also true in the clubhouse. You know, I was, you know, allowed to serve clubhouse for, you know, some years. It was also true of the region. It's also true of the fellowship. Because I can't control the fellowship. Although I've had some grand ideas of what we ought to do, folks. And the best one that I ever come up with was learn how to love each other. Distances don't really mean nothing. You know, my first sponsor nailed me to the wall one time. You know, I was bitching about going to an NA meeting that was 30 miles away, you know, round trip. And she asked me, she said, how far you ever went to get laid? And I didn't have to think about it. I knew 715 miles one way. So when they say a convention's going to be this and the convention's going to be that, big deal. You know, if the Spirit allows, you know, I'll be at the rest of them until I draw my last breath. I don't care. That was $10 too. You know. But I get here what I can't get in a regular meeting. But I also know that I have to keep going to regular meetings because I can't get here what I can get at them. I believe in home groups. It's been something that's been part of my recovery. The one I have now, oh boy. Yeah, a lot of them are here that are at that home group. I had never seen a group operate like this one. Can't talk about anything except what you done right and wrong the last 7 days in your program, and there's no feedback. And the best thing that's helped me do is get honest with Ed and get honest with other people. Share where I'm really coming from. Instead of, you know, this, I've been clean X number of years, and if you'll just work the steps, it'll all be okay. How well am I working the steps? And some days I haven't been doing too good. It's like, yeah, I'm pissed at one of my babies right now. You know, when I see him, I'm going to tell him about it. But I had to talk about it in the group Wednesday night before I could get to that point of going to him and telling him. That group knows me better than some of the ladies I've been in bed with. And it's been a trip in trying to deal with not pre-telling my story for the last 2 weeks. Last week I got on the plane 4 times coming up here. Bill working, well, they're going to bird, it's going, yep, I'm going to leave Thursday night. In the trade that I have, that can be dangerous at times. And I got to the point where, I was willing to stop doing that, so I started getting on the plane with Johnny over in England, coming over here. So see, I met Johnny in '82 in Memphis, and that was a trip. Him and the other people that was from England in '82 at Memphis, was the first people I'd met outside the United States. And we write each other a little bit, and he calls. I haven't called him yet, but every time I sit down at my little table there at the house to write Johnny in England, it's a gratitude rush all over again. I get just, where I'm coming from and where I, was at to where I'm at today, and I'm writing a letter to somebody in England. And I'm not special about that. Anybody can do it. All you gotta do is swap addresses. It's just like the other controversial things that go on in this fellowship. Just communicate. The relationship I've been in for the last year has taught me well about that. Just sharing it. It's time for me to hush, and I'm really honored. If it hadn't been for the support that I've gotten over the years from you people, I wouldn't be here today. And I know, one other belief that I have, and it's been reaffirmed time and time and time and time again. If you want this program, you can have it. You just got to want it more than anything else in the whole universe. If you want a conscious contact, it's got to be the same way. I always wanted to play the double-sided game. Have my cake and eat it too. With those two things, I can't do that. For me, it has to be all NA, and for me, it has to be, my loving spirit. And one other thing that helped me out, and I'm going to share this and I'll be quiet, is I've watched the Spirit work in many, many ways. And I know that in some of the talks that I gave, I pissed a lot of people off, folks. I really have. Because I didn't know how to express the feelings that I had. But the one that, I still jump for joy inside about is the movie Gandhi. Because Gandhi showed me how I could have loyalty to something, how I could have gratitude for all the people that's helped me all of my life, all the way from, the drill sergeant chewing on me to my mama changing my diapers to AA helping me when they did, because they did help. That loyalty to NA is my program of recovery that I choose today, and my obedience to my spirit. And I love y'all people. I know very true because I came real close to it at one time in my recovery. Y'all can do okay without me, but I can't do okay without you. And I thank you. God.